Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sarah Liz and I'm back with a stepped up emergency card video for you. This is Kit 22 birthday and kids birthday sentiments. So I have 2 pages of just happy birthday in a bunch of different fonts. And then I have some that are a little more kid-ish, but certainly there are sentiments on there that work for everybody. And then I reworked these pages. So we have major milestone birthdays, and I added 11 through 15 that were not on there before. And then there's a whole nother page with 21st, and then 30 through 100 we're hitting every 5 years. I know a bunch of you were like, yes, I'll use the older birthdays. And so I thought that was definitely worth it. You can get all of these with and without the circle. This printable is completely free for subscribers. You can also get all of this sort of kids birthday ones in 4 different fonts for strip sentiments. And then there's a bunch of just happy birthday at the bottom of each of these. And then this is our card sketch. Today, we're going to make 2 interactive cards with that sketch. You have your new birthday printable sentiments. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe. It really helps me out. But let's go ahead and dig right in. For this first card, we're using the Heartfelt Thanks and Scallops from Spellbinders, along with this brand new Dancin birthday dragon. He's so cute, you guys. I love him so much. The smart glasses, which I love. And then this is my favorite embossing folder of the moment. This is the Peppermint Stripes 2D embossing folder. So I have a strip that's 1.5 by 5.5. My dark teal is that large purple rectangle that's A2. And then that scallop that comes from the Heartfelt Scallops really is the same size as that large pink rectangle from our card sketch. It's just that it has scallops on it. So if you don't have this die set, that's okay, right? Use what you have. Do you have a different scallop die set or maybe a stitched rectangle? Whatever you have, give it a try. If you make things and you post them to social media, please tag me. I am on Instagram at Sassy's LLC, and then I'm on Facebook at Sarah Staroska, and I would love to see it. So I took my strip that I cut longer than 5.5 inches because sometimes they shrink up in embossing folders, and I ran that through my embossing folder. I wet it down with a baby wipe, but I probably didn't need to. This is 65-pound cardstock. I'm trying to work through my stash. I still have some old cardstock that's 65-pound that I don't use very often. That's just kind of taking up space. And I was like, I can use it for this strip. It'll work. I put glue all over the back of that guy, and then I used the grid on my mat to try to get that centered. And I'll just trim off the excess with my scissors. You could use a 3D embossing folder here as well, like whatever you like, but do be aware, especially with the 3D, they definitely shrink up. I cut the black rectangle according to the cutting guide. It's 3 by 4.25. But then for the white one, instead of giving myself a 1/4 inch margin, I made it slightly bigger. So it's 2 7/8 by 4 1/8. And it just gives me that teeny tiny little frame around the outside. Sometimes I really like that. I also wanted to make sure there was just a little bit more room for my dragon. This guy comes together pretty easily, and I'm going to start by adding his belly and then his tail. I'll be honest, I just followed the colors that were on the packaging because I thought it was so cute. I usually try to switch things up a little bit, but I couldn't help myself. I will say too, if you hear some noise in the background, I'm so sorry. We're in the middle of like some crazy winter blizzard, and my neighbors keep taking turns snow blowing their driveways. Pray for me, you guys. I don't do well in the cold, but here we are. I wanted to make sure I could get this video out for you on time. I am adding his little claws on there. I love how brilliantly this is designed. So there's enough room, like plenty of room, to add glue to little pieces, but still get that color variation as you're building everything. He comes with that teeny tiny present, so I just cut it from some white cardstock and then just the tiniest little bit of gold foil for the bow. And then I'm going to overlap the present with his 2 arms. I wiggled them around a little bit to try to find where I liked them best, but honestly, they look pretty good everywhere. You have 2 sets of wings for this dragon. The larger set is for his body, and then there's a small set that goes on his head. Like, his head is so big. They need their own wings. I have a 6-year-old whose head is so big. They would also need their own wings. And so I think he probably needs this card, or at least a card that uses this dragon. We just celebrated his birthday, so I don't know that this one will make it until next year. I like to pick up the wings with the body to help me with placement. It helps me to kind of see better where things are going. And then when I go to add his eyes, it just cuts holes into his head. And so I cut a little scrap of some white cardstock to glue behind there so that I have a place to put the black parts of his eyes. This isn't getting glued flat to the card, and so it's easier to do it this way than to try to like layer that onto the card. His head gets popped up on some foam. Then on the top, there's a crown that you can add as a little optional piece. In my last video, I used the Dancin birthday monster, and he has horns, and so I might try the horns on the dragon as well. I think that'd be really cute. There's also a Dancin birthday panda and a non-Dancin birthday dinosaur, and the glasses set has glasses for all of them. Even the dinosaur who's turned kind of sideways, there's like a slightly sideways set of glasses, which I think is really brilliant. I'm going to add little dots of glue all over the back of the glasses, just teeny tiny little dots so it doesn't just squeeze out everywhere. And then I'll add those onto his giant head. If you're putting together one of the other ones that doesn't tell you exactly where the eyes go and you want to use the glasses, make sure you're sort of using them at least as a reference while you place the eyeballs. I made that mistake a couple of times, but yeah, you need to make sure that they're going to fit. I am layering up a couple extra pieces for the body just so the whole thing is heavier. The heavier it is, the better it will swing. Plus, it is the moving element, and so I wanted it to be a little bit sturdier. I'm using 2mm foam squares, and I'm just cutting off a little section of it, like a quarter of that square, to stick in the middle to make my element interactive. But if you have a foam dot, go for it. I am all out. I had some for a while. I didn't even know where they were from. If you've got a good source for foam circles, I want to know about it because sometimes that helps. His head doesn't move, so I held the body there and traced a line around it so I knew where to put my foam so that it wouldn't interfere with the movement of the body. And I just added little slivers of the same foam that I used right behind the body to make sure everything lays nice and flat. I'm going to use the strip sentiments from kit 22, and I have one that says wishing you a magical birthday. I felt like my dragon was kind of magical. And these are about 1/4 inch when you trim them out. There's little tick marks to help you get them straight. And then I'm going to layer this onto a strip of cardstock that is 3/8 of an inch wide. And then I cut it to be exactly 3 inches long, right? So it's just as wide as it needs to be to fit all the way across that panel with the dragon on it. I'll flip it over and cut off the excess, and then I'm going to add that below the dragon. When you're adding a sentiment onto something like this, you want to make sure it's not going to interfere with the movement of your interactive element. And so I'm kind of pointing to his tail there. Honestly, I probably could have moved it up a little bit, like just a hair, but not a lot. I have that embossed panel on the background. So I have regular foam tape on the left and right, and then I have 1mm foam tape in the middle just to kind of even everything out and make sure I'm not going to have any saggy parts of my card if I do try to send this through the mail. And then I'm going to do my best to get this centered on the card. In the end, it's not. It's not centered, but it's pretty close. And I don't think anyone is going to notice. That finishes up card number 1, my friends. I love the embossed detail of that strip through the background, and that dragon is just the cutest. This card is also interactive, and I had imagined this mechanism, but didn't think it would end up on an elegant card, but it did. Who knew? So these 2 pieces are the large purple and pink rectangle, and they're cut according to the directions. But instead of my smaller rectangles, I have cut some pieces from this Make-A-Wish arch label. So I cut the smallest one that doesn't have scallops on the bottom. And then I used the essential arches from Spellbinders to cut 2 matching arches in white and navy that are slightly larger than the one with the fluting on it. I'm also using the large die of the month. We're not going to make the whole jar. I just stole a couple of blooms. I mean, why not? If you got them hanging out on your desk, because I always cut things out in bulk. I'm also using the Layered Cosmos backdrop. It is a BetterPress plate and stencil. I'm going to better press it here, but you could hot foil this instead. I was gonna hot foil it and I turned my machine on to warm up, but I left it too long and it turned off. I didn't want to wait for it. So we're going to better press it. This is not better press paper. It's just cardstock, and that's fine. I wanted almost a tone on tone look here. So I'm using a French blue BetterPress ink, and I'm just using like a pounce and twist motion to make sure I get ink all over. I edited that down a little bit because I couldn't quite tell where it was. It's so light. And then I ran that through. I do get a little bit of an impression, but not like you would with the cotton card panels. There are 5 layers to this stencil. I'm not going to use them all, but they're absolutely gorgeous. And then I'm busting out. You guys know I've been obsessing over these for the past 3 or 4 videos. These are the large blending brushes from Spellbinders that just came out. They're the size of my palm. You get 2 of them for 13 bucks, and they're amazing for laying down light ink. I also have Altenew brushes, and I love those too, which are great for laying down heavy ink. I also really love the price point on these Spellbinders brushes. Like, they're insane. So I am going over just the blooms just to give a little more interest. I will also pop up 2 panels that I did with this set where I did all of the color, just so you can kind of see what it looks like, because it's gorgeous. You guys, it's so, so pretty. And then here, I have just cut this down ever so slightly to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm going to glue that onto some navy cardstock that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. That floral background just gives me a little tone on tone pattern. You could do that with a background stamp or really anything that you have, right? It doesn't have to be that set. Here's the interactive mechanism. I took my strip and I am wrapping it around my card, right? It's not fancy. I didn't measure anything, but I would do this by hand instead of trying to use your scoreboard, because you're going to get a better fit this way. I will say this is that same 65-pound cardstock, so it's a little easier to fold by hand. 80-pound would also be fine. When you start moving into like 100-pound cardstock, I have a harder time getting a nice fold when I do it by hand on something like this. So I have wrapped that around and glued it on one end, but not the other. You could do both. I just was worried this would get trickier. And then I'm going to layer up my arches. I'm going to have this so the arch is at the bottom. So I glued it to the white one from the Essential Arches, and then I'll just take it to my trimmer and take little slivers off until I feel like the margin is the same. And so I'm holding the navy one behind it just to get that same size, because we're going to sandwich that strip in between our arches. You could do this with any shape. You could do this with any dies. I love an arch because it creates this beautiful resting place for our circled sentiment, but there's tons of great companies that make arches. I love the Spellbinders Essential Arches because you get so many of them and they're so close together. And I love the fluted anything. So all of these are great. But scrapbook.com also has some great arches that you might try if you're looking for something at a slightly lower price point. Though, honestly, Spellbinders puts theirs on sale so often these days that you can get them pretty cheaply as well. Once I get my interactive mechanism put together, I'm going to go ahead and glue down that other flap. I could have done it at the beginning, but I wasn't sure. I've never made a card like this before, so I thought this was fun. The bloom here is just 2 pieces, and off camera, I did add just a little bit of inking on the back piece so that it would show through darker. There's like holes in the front part of the bloom, but then I just glued it together. It's super simple. And then I'll arrange this so they're going to come right out from behind a matching lavender circle. That's my 2-inch circle that I use for all of my emergency sentiments that are around. And then I'm hanging off a little bit, and I like that. I like that it looks like it's sort of extending beyond the edges here. If you don't have this set, then any blooms would work, or anything would work, honestly. Like, see what you've got in your stash. Again, if you make cards and you post them to social media, tag me. I want to know about it. I'm on Instagram at Sassy's LLC, but then it's Sarah Staroska here on Facebook. I'm adding a little bit of foam behind that 2-inch circle just to make sure that it's not all wonky, because there's some dimension with that cardstock in the leaves and the flower. And then I'm going to use some removable adhesive to add this happy birthday right to the center. And that finishes up card number 2. And you've got this fun mechanism that slides. As I'm looking at it now, I'm like, oh, I could have hidden like a message behind there. I didn't think to do it at the time, but try that too. That would be lots of fun. This is the fresh picked berries. There's a whole like set of these fresh picked something from Spellbinders that just came out. They're meant to cover a card front, like a full A2 card front in a particular way, but I don't actually like that. So I wanted to use them a little bit differently. I'm also going to use Effervescent Flora, which is the 3D embossing folder of the month from Spellbinders, along with the Essential Stylish Ovals. I'm assembling our blooms here, and you can see how in the bottom right-hand corner, it comes to a corner. This is designed to have a bunch of blooms that fit together and fill a very sort of rectangular area, but I wanted to stretch this and use it differently. I love the blooms, but I don't always like that sort of organic meets geometric feel. I've seen a bunch of stuff on Pinterest that has a really similar style to it. I hadn't seen anything like this before I saw it from Spellbinders, but maybe it's a style now. You'll have to let me know if you've seen other things kind of like that. I added a little gold foil detail for the very tops of those blooms, and then we're going to work on assembling essentially the pieces that make up our card sketch. I have taped down the smaller of my ovals onto a scrap of that navy cardstock because we're just going to create a little frame with it. And then here is my 1.5 inch strip, and actually I cut this one down to 1 inch instead, but you could really, any size that you have, use your scraps, it'll work. I put a little temporary adhesive just in the middle of that strip because I'm not even keeping that part. I'm just keeping the tops and the bottoms, and that's going to be the strip that normally ran behind the smaller rectangles on our card, but we've got this opening and I want to recess that down into a well. And so it was going to be really difficult to get that strip going through there without having some ragged ends. So this gives me that same curve on those tiny little strips that my oval has. I'm going to take just some wet glue and put it behind my blooms, and I'm adding it onto some white shimmer cardstock. The shimmer doesn't pick up on camera very well a lot of times, but in person it's really, really pretty and adds just another layer of dimension to this. I am not going to keep that whole panel, but I wasn't sure how much I needed or how much of those blooms was going to show on my card. So that gets me started. I'm adding matching navy cardstock in an A2 panel to a top folding card base, but you could go either way, it doesn't really matter. And then I'm just kind of wiggling my ovals around, trying to figure out what part of the blooms I want to frame out. And I'll use my scissors just to trim that white panel a little bit smaller. Then I'm adding some foam tape. You know me, I like really, really thin foam, but on something like this, more dimension gives you like an even greater dramatic effect. I've done this a couple of times in videos lately. Obviously, I'm on a kick, but I love it. And so a little bit of wet glue to give me some wiggle time, and I'm gonna lay that on top of my blooms. Then I can add the whole thing to my card base. The purple panel is 4 by 5.25 according to the card sketch, and so I do have that 1/8 of an inch border all the way around. If I'm working with a really dark color cardstock, a lot of times I'll grab a scrap of white just to help me create a little more contrast as I'm getting everything lined up, make sure it's on there straight. I'm adding some wet glue to those little navy pieces that I cut out. I suppose I could have glued them to that purple panel when I ran it through the die cutting machine originally, but I wasn't sure what I was doing yet, so I did it this way instead. Here are some more sentiment strips, and I'm just going to add a little happy birthday. I'm squaring it up, and then I just use that finger guard from my trimmer to make sure that it has equal margins on the left and right. I will add that to a 3/8 of an inch strip of matching navy cardstock, and then I'll bring it back to my trimmer just to make sure that last edge has the same margin as the other 3. I'm going to use the same foam tape here that I used to pop up that purple panel. It's a bunch of tongue twisters today, you guys. But I wanted it to be at the same height as everything else. I'll add that on there and make sure it's straight, do my very best. And then that will finish up card number 3. I hope you enjoyed this. I would love to know which of these 3 cards is your favorite. If you are interested in that free printable, again, it's 100% free for subscribers, but I do ask that you subscribe to my channel. Then you can go to the description box below the video and you will find it down there at the very bottom. It has all of those new birthdays. I've also updated the original kit to include those. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.